one company built cars for the masses, while another crafted legends for the track. So Ford, the giant of industry, made an offer to buy Ferrari, the king of racing. The deal was set until Enzo Ferrari walked away, delivering a blistering personal insult aimed directly at Henry Ford II. Ford's response wasn't to write a letter. It was to declare a war, to spend millions to build a machine for one single purpose: to go to Ferrari's home turf and crush him. This is the real story of how an American car humbled an Italian giant. In the early 1960s, Ford Motor Company was the undisputed king of the American road. They were an industrial titan, a symbol of post-war prosperity. They had perfected the art of building cars for the masses. Their vehicles were reliable, practical, affordable, and about as exciting as a station wagon. But the world was changing. The generation born after the war was coming of age. They didn't want their parents' sensible sedan. They wanted passion. They wanted style. They wanted speed. And they were buying it from Ford's competitors. Ford's visionary VP, Lee Iacocca, knew the company was facing a crisis of identity. His solution was simple and radical. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. To capture the hearts and wallets of the next generation, Ford couldn't just build cars. They had to build a legend. They needed to go racing. But building a racing legacy from scratch could take decades. Ford didn't have that kind of time, so they devised a shortcut. If you can't build the best, buy them. Their target, the most famous name in all of motorsport, a company that was, at its heart, a racing team that sold road cars to fund its obsession. Ferrari. Ford spent millions of dollars auditing Ferrari's assets. A top-tier delegation was dispatched to Italy with an offer of $10 million, a staggering sum for the time. The deal was meticulously crafted over months. Everything was agreed upon. All that was left needed was the signature of one man. Enzo Ferrari had built his company from nothing. It was his life's work, his passion, his empire. And as he reviewed the final document, he found a clause he could not tolerate. Ford's corporate headquarters would have final approval over the racing budget. He would no longer have total control of his team. In that moment, the deal was dead. But Enzo wasn't finished. He looked at the men who represented the most powerful industrialist in America and delivered a message intended for Henry Ford II and him alone. He told them he could never work for an ugly company that builds ugly cars in an ugly factory, and that Henry Ford II was not Henry Ford I. He was just a fat grandson, piggybacking on a legacy he didn't create. When the delegation returned to Dearborn, and Ford heard Ferrari's message, the insults against his company, his cars, and his family name, he took it as a profound declaration of war. This was no longer about marketing. It was no longer about selling cars. It was now a matter of honor. The Deuce looked at his top lieutenants and gave one of the most famous and ruthless mandates in corporate history. He told them to find the best engineers and the best drivers in the world. And that money was no object. Their mission was simple: go to Le Mans and beat his ass. The battlefield was chosen. Not just any race, but the oldest, most prestigious, and most merciless endurance race in the world. The 24 Hours of Le Mans. For one full day, man and machine are pushed beyond the breaking point. It is a relentless 24-hour sprint, a brutal crucible of speed and reliability designed to find a car's single weakest point and destroy it. And this unconquerable mountain was Ferrari's personal kingdom. They were the undisputed masters of endurance racing. They had won Le Mans 6 years in a row. In fact, Ferrari was so dominant that in 1963, Ferrari cars took the top 6 places. For Ford, this was an invasion, an attempt to storm a fortress that had never been breached. Fueled by Henry Ford's blank check, the first weapon was forged. It was called the GT40, and it was a masterpiece of design. A rolling piece of American ambition, engineered in Britain and powered by a high-tech Ford V8. On paper, it was a world beater. And in 1964, Ford arrived at Le Mans with the expectation to win. But Le Mans doesn't care about theory. The brutal high speeds of the French circuit revealed a terrifying flaw. The car's aerodynamics were a disaster. At over 200 miles per hour, the GT40 would generate so much lift, its wheels would practically leave the ground. It was dangerously unstable. And what the aerodynamics didn't kill, the endurance did. The complex gearboxes shattered. The high-strung engines failed. Before the race was even half over, every single one of Ford's cars was out. Back in Dearborn, the humiliation was intolerable. The Deuce's vengeance-fueled project had become a public joke, a multi-million-dollar embarrassment. He realized the problem. His program was being run by committees and corporate yes-men. They knew how to build a sedan, but they had no idea how to win a war. There and then, Ford concluded that what they needed was not a suit, but a gunslinger. So he made a call to the one man who lived and breathed racing, Carroll Shelby. A larger-than-life Texan chicken farmer turned race car driver, Shelby was one of the only Americans to ever win Le Mans. He was a brilliant, no-nonsense car builder, and the absolute antithesis of Ford's corporate culture. The project was ripped away from the suits and the engineers. The keys to the entire kingdom and Henry Ford's blank check were handed to a single maverick genius. His mission? Tame the beast and finish the war Ford had started. Carroll Shelby knew he couldn't fix the GT40 from a workshop. He needed a driver who could push the car to its absolute breaking point and beyond. He needed someone who could speak the car's language. He needed his chief test driver, Ken Miles. Miles was a purist, a World War II tank commander who had become one of the most respected sports car drivers in America. He was a brilliant diagnostician, and famously, uncompromisingly difficult. He immediately told Shelby the multi-million-dollar car was a bloody awful mess, with terrible brakes and an unstable chassis. While the Ford suit saw an insubordinate hothead, Shelby saw an invaluable asset. He knew Miles's brutal honesty was worth more than 1,000 corporate reports. He was the unreasonable man who could find a car's limits, because he was always willing to crash it. Under Shelby and Miles, the corporate science experiment became a ruthless boot camp. For a solid year, they waged war on the car's weaknesses. The deadly high-speed aerodynamics were tamed with crude but effective spoilers. The brakes, which cooked themselves in a single lap, were re-engineered so the entire assembly could be swapped out in minutes during a pit stop. And the fragile engines were torn down and rebuilt, stronger and more reliable than ever before. When they returned to Le Mans in 1965, it was with a completely different animal. The GT40 was a missile. Driven by Ken Miles, it shattered the lap record, proving it was now the fastest car on the circuit. For the first time, the prancing horse of Ferrari was being hunted. The impossible dream was finally in sight. But Le Mans is a marathon, not a sprint. And Ford had built a world-class sprinter. The punishing, relentless pace took its toll. One by one, the gearboxes, pushed beyond their limits, shattered. The new engines, stressed for hours, failed. The embarrassment of 1964 had successfully been replaced by something far worse. Heartbreak. After the heartbreak of 1965, the Ford board had seen enough. The Le Mans program had become a black hole of money and a source of constant public failure. They told Henry Ford II the project was over. It was time to quit. But for the Deuce, Ferrari's insult was still ringing in his ears. It was never about the money. He looked at the board and overruled them all. His war was not over. He summoned Shelby and asked him what it would truly take to win. Shelby's answer was simple. There's no substitute for cubic inches. They needed to stop trying to beat Ferrari with a sophisticated European-style engine and start fighting like Americans. They needed raw, overwhelming brute force. When Ford returned to Le Mans in 1966, they came for only one thing: to wage a war. The team had morphed into more than just a racing team. It was an armada, a full-scale invasion force powered by the bottomless resources of the Ford Motor Company. An army of engineers, mechanics, and drivers all focused on a single objective. Enzo Ferrari would bring his handcrafted racers. Ford would bring the full, overwhelming might of American industry. Henry Ford II was there in person, his presence a clear and unspoken message to every member of the team. After 2 years of failure and humiliation, failure was no longer an option. From the moment the flag dropped, Ford's strategy was clear. Ditch the finesse. Make this a brutal 24-hour street fight. Carroll Shelby had given his drivers one simple instruction: go fast. He would use Ford's overwhelming power advantage as a sledgehammer, forcing a pace so punishing that Ferrari's delicate, high-strung racers would have no choice but to brake. And brake they did. The relentless pace was a war of attrition. For hours, the Titans traded blows, but Shelby's sledgehammer was winning. The Ferraris, stressed to their breaking point, began to fail. Their gearboxes shattered. Their engines expired. Ken Miles, on the other hand, was putting on a masterclass. He was executing a vendetta, lap after punishing lap. He was the tip of Ford's spear, and he was unstoppable. As the final hour ticked away, the result was no longer in doubt. Ford had done it. They had come to Le Mans and broken Ferrari. With their cars running first, second, and third, Ford's head of public relations, Leo Bibe, saw an opportunity for the ultimate marketing photo. A perfect, staged, 3-car photo finish. He gave the order to Ken Miles, who was leading by a huge margin, to slow down and let the other Fords catch him. They would cross the line together, a perfect symbol of team victory. Miles, the man who had done more than anyone to develop the car and had dominated the race, was furious. But he was a team player. He obeyed the order. But in the quest for the perfect photo, the Ford executives had overlooked a devastating technicality. Le Mans officials declared that because the second-place car, driven by Bruce McLaren, had started further down the grid, it had technically covered more distance in the same 24 hours. By a few feet, Bruce McLaren was declared the winner. Ken Miles, the man who had earned the victory, was demoted to second place by his own team. Ford had its victory. Henry Ford II had his revenge. He had humbled Enzo Ferrari on the world's biggest stage. But the triumph was forever stained by injustice. For Ken Miles, the tragedy would be compounded just 2 months later. He was killed in a high-speed crash while testing Ford's next-generation race car. The man who tamed the beast and who had earned the Le Mans crown was gone. The GT40 would go on to win Le Mans 3 more times, cementing its place as an American icon. But the legend is forever defined by the War of 1966. A brutal lesson on the cost of obsession and the clash between a racer's spirit and a corporation's ambition. It remains the ultimate proof that the greatest victories often leave the deepest scars.